For far too long, worms and rush duels felt like they were just kind of put into two different boxes. You either had to be a constructor worm or a destructor worm. And okay, both of them were anime decks, so it did make sense, but where's the diversity? Thankfully, that is no longer. Now we finally have the new worm deck that can stand toe-to-toe with some of the best out there. No longer are we reliant on high-level fusions. Instead, we have a low-level contact fusion. Maximum monsters? No. We use main deck high-level monsters to deal with our opponents. Destroy your opponent's monsters before going in for the attack? No, okay, wait, yeah, kind of. Like, we flip them over and pierce them, I guess? But we also destroy the face-down cards too. And it's like, less cost. Hello everyone, my name is Protagonist, you can call me Protag, and I'm back with another episode of Rush Review. This is a series where I go over decks and themes to help introduce them to people who might want to learn about Rush, or for those who might want to try something new. The Clad Dragons are, well, powerful worm monsters that can deal devastating effects when cards are face down on your opponent's field. But to learn more about them, we rely on the adventurers that bravely explore their habitats and provide the necessary data to understand them. However, one of the researchers, Stella, comes across a dragon egg, one that she takes home to study. That one decision would cost her, as the egg starts to curse her body, warping her skin and her appearance. So let's dive through the research and maybe we can find the answers ourselves. Starting with the research team, we have Stella, the Clad Dragon researcher. On the main phase that you normal or special summon this card, you can excavate the top 4 cards of the deck. Then you can add an excavated level 7 or higher monster to your hand. The rest go back to the bottom of the deck in any order. This is probably the best way to get your high level dragons, but surprisingly, you can also use this to get any other level 7 or higher monster. So expect to see this in other decks as well. Estelle, the Clad Dragon researcher, on the main phase this card was normal or special summoned, lets you mill 2. Then you can send a card from your hand to the grave, and if you do, you can add a worm with 2400 defense from your grave to your hand. Shanna, the Clad Dragon researcher, checks to see if you have 10 or more cards in your deck. Then shuffle 2 worms from your grave back into your deck to change a face-up monster on your opponent's field to face-down defense. You can then send the top card of your deck to the grave, and if it was a worm with 2400 defense, you can add it to your hand instead. With Stella, the Clad Dragon researcher, and a level 4 or lower worm, you can contact fuse into Light Clad Dragon Egg. This card allows you to special summon a level 7 or higher monster from your hand face up to your field. If you special summon a worm by this effect, it gains 800 attack and piercing. You might think that since you're spending 2 to make a card and then summoning another card, it's a little bit redundant, but honestly the attack gain and pierce is a godsend. Now we move on to the powerful dragons of the deck. Inferno Clad Dragon Flagel can be tribute summoned in attack position by tributing just 1 worm monster. If your opponent has no face-up monsters on their field during the main phase that you normal or special summon this card, you can destroy a face-down card on your opponent's field. However, for the rest of the turn, you can only attack with worm-type monsters. Verdant Clad Dragon Gree needs you to send the top card of your deck to the grave. This card then gains 800 attack for the turn, and if your opponent has no face-up monsters on the field, you can shuffle a face-down card on their field back into the owner's deck. Then we have Magic Clad Dragon Vezel the Star Eater. On the main phase you normal or special summon this card, you can change all face-up monsters on your opponent's field to face-down defense position. Yes, every monster. This is a pretty strong disruptor as flipping cards to face-down defense turns off any pesky continuous effects that could hinder your plays. But that's not all the dragons, as Stella's egg did hatch into Light Clad Dragon Lates. On the turn this card is normal summoned, you can add a Stella the Clad Dragon researcher or a level 9 worm from your grave to the hand. A great way to get more resources or even your Vezel back onto the field. Now let's take a look at some of the research materials we have at our disposal. Researching the Clad Dragondom allows you to special summon a level 5 or lower worm with 900 defense from your grave face up to the field. For the rest of the turn, that special summon monster can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a worm monster in attack position. This allows you to summon any researcher and use their effect again. But this also lets you cheat out your high level Clad Dragons too, which is honestly great. Loot from the Clad Dragondom needs you to send a worm from your hand or face up on your field to the graveyard. Then you can draw a card and show it. If it's a worm monster, special summon a level 7 or higher worm monster from your hand face up to the field. Then we have the Clad Dragon Tome chapter on curse breaking. Excavate the top 5 cards of your deck. You can then add an excavated level 4 or lower worm with 900 defense to your hand. The rest go back into your deck. And finally, we have Curse of the Magic Clad Dragon. Activate when your opponent normal or special summons a monster, then you can send a monster from your hand or field to the graveyard. You can then special summon up to 2 worm monsters from your grave onto your field and face up defense position. If you special summon Magic Clad Dragon Vezel the Star Eater by this effect, you can then change a face up monster on your opponent's field to face down defense. Honestly, a pretty good disruptor. It adds a body for defense, and it can turn off any other monster that might be on your opponent's field. Now let's talk about what else we can add. Worms aren't that populated with, unique themes. Like I mentioned before, we have the Constructor and Destructor worms. However, that doesn't mean that we can't find some strategies that can help us too. Demolition Soldier Ashiba BK activates their effect when you have 2 or less monsters on your field. Then you can mill cards up to the number of face-up worm monsters on your field times 2. If 2 or more monsters were among the cards sent, this card can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a worm in attack position for the rest of the turn. A great way to get cards in the grave, as well as getting Clad Dragons onto the field. For card draw, we have some options there as well. Picklon the Constructor Fairy needs you to send a worm from your hand to the grave so that you can draw a card. But for me, Legendary Scale Ruler is almost a guarantee add. By sending a worm from your hand to the grave, you can draw 2 cards. However though, you cannot activate the effects of non-worm monsters until the end of the turn. So just keep that in mind if you are adding other non-engine pieces as well. We also have a new legend monster that can help with summoning more worms. Magma Dragon, on the main phase that you normal or special summon this card, lets you special summon a worm from your grave to the field in face-up defense position. However, for the rest of the turn, you can't activate the effects of the special summon monster or Magma Dragon again. It definitely can be useful in getting more tributes onto the field, but it's just unfortunate that you can't revive a Clad Dragon and use their effect. I honestly don't think it would be that broken. We also have the newest level 9 monster, Exalted Celestial Custodian of the Sacred Summit. If you don't have another copy of this card in the field, you can special summon this card from your hand in face-up defense position by paying 500 life points. While on the field, it can't be destroyed by opponent's card effects, and you take no damage from your opponent's effects. A good way to add a body onto the field for either tribute or just a defensive option if you need it. And since we do have a worm-based deck, we can then utilize the Blistopia cards to our advantage. Specifically, Autumn Leaves of Blistopia is a strong contender. Activate this field spell by placing a worm from your grave to the top of the deck. While this card is in the field zone, face-up worms get 300 attack and piercing. There is a cute synergy with Autumn Leaves and cards like Stella and Clad Dragon Tome since they need to excavate the top 5 cards of the deck, and with Autumn Leaves you can curate this by placing whatever worm you want from the grave to the top of your deck. If you are looking for more ways to wipe out the board, Demolition Art Absolute Destruction is definitely a choice. Activate this when your opponent's monster declares an attack. Then you can shuffle 6 worm monsters from your grave back into the deck. Then if the total level of the monster shuffled back is 16 or higher, you can destroy all attack position monsters on your opponent's field. It's not a bad trade-off since you can also stack your deck back up for the long game, but honestly, it's up to you. Alright, so here's the deck list we're working with today. We're gonna have 3 copies of Bezel, 3 copies of Custodian, and 3 copies of Gris-Ray. As you can see, I'm not running Flagel here, and that's mainly because I don't want to run too many high levels in the deck. Now, you can replace, a copy of the Custodian and put a Flagel in, maybe 1 or 2, but never 3. I think that's just way too many and increases your chance of bricking. But if you want to add it, you definitely can. No worries there. Our legend monster is going to be Magma Dragon, just so that we can, test it out, since it is a new legend monster and it does work pretty well with the deck. For our researchers, we're running 3 copies of Estelle, only 1 copy of Shanna, 2 Legend Magician, 3 Stella the Clad Dragon Researcher, 3 copies of BK, 3 copies of Lates, and yeah, that's really it. The low levels are really good. I only wanted to have 1 copy of Shanna because while the flip down effect is really nice, we do have Bezel for that, and sometimes you would rather see some of your other low level monsters that just do a lot more for the deck rather than put stuff back and then hopefully you get to add a card to your hand. Like that's not guaranteed stuff, so that's the only reason why. For our spell cards, we are running 3 copies of Legendary Scale Ruler, 3 copies of Researching the Clad Dragondom. Our legend spell is going to be Graceful Charity, and we are running 3 copies of Legend Strike, just because it's good backer removal, and we are running Legend Magician as well, so we have a good synergistic package here. Now for Autumn Leaves of Blistopia, you can run 2 copies here. I run 1 just because I don't want to see too many copies of it, but if you want to make sure that you at least can try and get 1 early on and not accidentally mill it, then you should run 2. For our trap cards, Curse of the Magic Cloud Dragon, 3 copies. You could run Shiny Shady here as an option as well. I do have it in the side deck, we'll talk about it later. And of course, Quaking Mirror Force because it flips everything face down, setting you up for a really good turn afterwards. As for our extra deck, nothing really matters here except for the Contact Fusion, like Cloud Dragon Egg. It's really good. It's the only fusion monster you have, so you might as well run it. But this is just to show that there are other options that you can use here. Destructive Worm Bakhmut, there are fusions like this one, the Demolition Charge Dragon, Dangerous Blastamut is a really, really good option if you want to find more firepower and just overall destruction. No pun intended. So yeah, there's just other options that you can do with the other worm type monsters that are available to you. For a side deck, this isn't anything too crazy. This is just something that I was like, well, if I want to flip things face down and just remove a bunch of things, what can I do? Roar the First Fantasy or Primal Howling is, your staple back removal. That's nothing crazy there. Auto Reverse is just a fun tech where you get to flip everything face down, so that helps you with your removal plays. Curse of the Rising Light, really good going second option, especially when you're going second because of the fact that you can flip stuff, then you can draw more cards, and that gets you more resources to hopefully be able to, break down your opponent's board. Pot of Greed is, well, that's just your other alternative if you don't feel like Graceful is doing it for you. Trad Tax, Demolition Art, Absolute Destruction, we already talked about this card. Evac for anything that is just way too scary that your dragons cannot handle. Shiny Shady because it's good, and it's actually really good here, not just because I like it, but, being able to flip things into face-down defense position is always a plus in the Clad Dragon deck. And finally, Torrential Tribute, it's a good offensive or defensive option depending on what you're playing. So with all that out of the way, let's check out some duels and see how it goes. So I wanted to first show this funny mirror match. I start with Ruler to send Vezel and draw 2. I special Custodian to play BK to mill, then I Lots to get Vezel back and use it and BK to summon Vezel. Then I play Autumn Leaves and set a card before passing. My opponent starts with Stella, which does make things a little bit awkward, but thankfully they don't hit anything. Scale Ruler pitches Gree-Ray and they also play Lots, but they don't use the effect as they need to send Gree-Ray back for their own Autumn Leaves. The two monsters do get Contact Fuse for Egg, and they summoned a buffed up Vezel who flips everything. They set one and pierce through my own Vezel. I Stella and miss, and Shanna flips their Vezel. The two are then tributed for Gree-Ray because I needed Shanna in grave to activate Researching to revive her. She then flips their Egg, and now I can Gree-Ray to move their back row, and then after flipping Custodian to attack, I pierce through their own monsters. Unfortunately, their next turn doesn't go too well as they play Lates, but they only get a Vezel and I guess not enough tributes as they set 3 and pass. Shanna flips their Lates and Gree-Ray goes to work on their back row. Then I make a second Gree-Ray to remove more. And I make a really dumb mistake here. I summon Magma Dragon and use the Gree-Ray and Custodian to make a Vezel and then use the Magma Dragon to revive Gree-Ray. But then I forgot the effects are negated, so all I could do was attack through and hope it was enough, which it thankfully was. And now we have a duel against Spark Hearts. My opponent card troopers to draw 1 and then leaves it to actually get fields. Pite mills and then they ritual summon into Passion Magma. Anesh gets Girl, which gets pitched by Saturnius' Orb to draw 2, which then gets them Hat and another fields to make a second Passion Magma and set 1 pass. On my turn, Stella manages to hit Vezel and Estelle mills some before Ruler pitches Gree-Ray to draw 2. Then the two Contact Fuse into Egg, which lets me special summon Vezel to flip everything face down. Magician is used with Egg to make a second Vezel, and with Custodian on the field, I attack with my bigger Vezel first. This pierces thanks to the Egg, and I clear the other one with my second Vezel. On their turn, Girl is tributed for Magma, and she uses her effect to turn my worms to defense position and recycle some cards. Orb draws 2, and Anesh is summoned to Ritual Summon for Passion Girl. Passion Girl destroys a Vezel and Fiora mills and gets her Ritual back, which is then used to make Passion Magma. They set 1, and Passion Magma destroys my Custodian. I Legend Strike to bring back Magician so that I can remove a back row. Stella doesn't hit this time, and so I can only set 2 and attack the Passion Girl before passing. They spark for 700, and Jess destroys my back row, which is unfortunate. However, the follow-up isn't as good because they only get Anesh and then Passion Girl. It was enough to at least attack my monsters though. I start with Ruler to draw 2 and Lates gets me Vezel. Researching revives Estelle, who mills and gets me Gree-Ray. Estelle is tributed for Vezel to flip everything, and the other two make Gree-Ray to remove Passion Magma. I set the rest and attack the face down with Vezel and face with Gree-Ray. Studio is played and Leave It is tributed for Magma, which is then when I activate my trap to revive a Vezel and flip Magma face down. They do Sparks for some damage, but it's over. On my turn, Gree-Ray removes the face down and I attack for game. GG's. What I like about the Clad Dragons is how easy it is to pick up. However, by themselves, they don't seem to have the destructive power needed to be more threatening. Autumn Leaves definitely helps with that, but as we saw in the mirror, it might not be a viable option. That's why I've seen decks run more destructive worms, or some even use Clad Dragons and Monarchs together, since Lindorm and Drakh are worm type. Like, the utility is all there, it's just that you need a bit more attack power if you can find it. From some preliminary results, we do see that Clad Dragon is holding up against some of the better decks. Obviously, adding Custodian is a really good counter to things like Spark Hearts or even, the burn from Lurker, but it just doesn't outpace some of those decks when sometimes you just don't get the right cards in hand. Hopefully in the future we get to see more dragons, and if we do get to see more researchers, things that can help increase the amount of cards that we can draw. Anyway, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so very much for watching this episode of Rush Review. If you liked what you saw, please leave a like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment on what other decks you might want to see in the future. This has been Protagonist signing out for today, and I will see you all next time. Peace.